Welcome into Brewers Daily. I'm your host, Dave Gasper. Lots to get to on the show here today. Continued fallout from the Caleb Durban trade that the Brewers made with the Boston Red Sox. We're going to take a look at where the infield and the rotation depth are now after the move. Matt Arnold, Brewers president of baseball operations, he spoke to reporters on Monday shortly after the trade, so we're going to get into some of his comments that he made, some of the takeaways that I had from what he had to say. We got that coming up here because, this trade is something that, seemingly came out of the blue here, that apparently that they had been working on for quite a while. Matt Arnold talking with Craig Breslow of the Boston Red Sox, and, there's a lot of moving parts in this deal. You got 3 players coming back. You got 3 players going out, plus a draft pick. Second year in a row. My goodness, that the Brewers have traded away their competitive balanced draft pick to the Boston Red Sox. Mind you, both have been to the Red Sox. Last time Quinn Priester, this time Kyle Harrison. But you got 3 players and a draft pick going out for 3 players. So 6-player deal. In the end, it's going to be 7 players along in this trade. But sending out Caleb Durban, who you got for Devin Williams, who turned in a Rookie of the Year finalist type performance this past season, which was as good as you could hope for with Caleb Durban. That was just a really fantastic rookie season. It went as best as they possibly could have expected in that Brewers front office with Caleb Durban. And looking like, your regular everyday starter at third base and being a potential, important guy for this team, going into his second year in the big leagues. But the Brewers have invested heavily in the corner infield in the draft in recent years. And so they got some guys coming up. Was he really going to be the long-term answer over the next 5 years at third base for the Brewers? Probably not. So they make the move now while the stock was high. And you include some of your other infielders in there as well, Andrew Monasterio and Anthony Siegler. But Monasterio and Siegler on their own really probably weren't worth all that much. They're backup infielders. At that, Durban is the real prize here for the Red Sox. They want some additional depth there, sure. But those guys are not getting you a guy like Kyle Harrison and Shane Drohan and David Hamilton. Maybe Mona for Hamilton straight up kind of thing, because those guys kind of have similar type roles. But to have those guys in there and to get the caliber of pitchers like Harrison, like Drohan, that says a lot about what the value that Caleb Durban had. And really, it does kind of clear out some space here for these guys. And I really like the pitchers that the Brewers got here. David Hamilton, I think he's going to be an interesting utility type guy. I'm really hoping not to see him as a regular in the everyday lineup at third base. But Kyle Harrison, he just seems to fit exactly what the Brewers like to target in terms of pitchers. Now, I know I said on Monday's show that Kyle Harrison was a first-round pick. I actually misspoke. He was a third-round pick back in 2020, but he was given first-round money by the San Francisco Giants, so that's why I conflated the two there. But he was actually a third-rounder, but still, first-round payday, first-round pedigree that he had there, and obviously one of the top pitching prospects for a long time over there. And Harrison, 4-something ERAs over his career in his 3 seasons, a 4.39 ERA at the major league level. And this was kind of the same story here for Quinn Priester, where he had that first round type pedigree, although Priester was actually a first round pick. But he was not able to put it together, had high ERAs, ERAs over 4 at the big league level. I think Priester's was even higher. And then the Brewers like, okay, we'll take him. And they, sprinkle their, Chris Hook magic on him and their pitching lab magic. And next thing you know, he's an absolute stud. That's what happened with Priester. And I'm imagining that's what the Brewers are envisioning here with Kyle Harrison. He's got a 5-pitch mix, but primarily throws 2 pitches, the four-seam fastball and the slurve, 86% of the time this past season. He also works in a changeup, a cutter, and a sinker. So that's a big part of it there. In 2024, when he had his largest sample size at the big league level, 124 innings, he had just 3 pitches that were registered: the four seam, the slurve, and a changeup. So him being able to add the cutter and the sinker there, albeit at low percentages, I think that is certainly a big part of his profile, and perhaps the Brewers will look to up those percentages. They've really liked adding cutters to arsenals to turn guys into aces. See Corbin Burns. Working with cutters, working with sinkers, and those fastball variations, the Brewers have had a ton of success with that in the past. So there's got to be some stuff that they see in Harrison's arsenal that they really like, that they know they can work with, that they can sharpen and turn Harrison into a bona fide stud. So I would not be surprised if that ends up being the reality here. Shane Drowan, he's someone as well who's got a really good arsenal, had really good results last year in AAA, and he's going to put himself, especially at 27 years old, that's pretty old for a prospect, pretty old for a guy who has not yet made his major league debut. He was he had dealt with some, injury issues in the past, but still, he's a guy that I think when the Brewers get their hands on him, what they can do with his stuff and what they can turn him into, I think we're going to see a really fantastic version of Shane Drowan. It probably is going to be more of a reliever type for him rather than a starter, just because, just simply the numbers that the Brewers have for their starting rotation. I mean, that's probably his best bet to make it. And, how they're going to end up working this thing through, getting guys all the innings that they need, provided everyone is healthy. Now, we saw last year that health can go away very, very quickly with your pitching staff. So having more starting pitchers is certainly not a problem. I'd certainly rather have more than less. So great in that regard. And being able to flip, Caleb Durban for it, I think that's fantastic. I think on paper, like on its own, I think it's a good trade. Being able to trade, putting together a couple of those assets there, especially 2 assets that really don't add a whole lot. And as much as I love Monasterio, not adding a whole lot, really, but adding him and Siegler in there and getting pitchers of this caliber and this pedigree along with Durban, I think that's fantastic on paper. The question really, all that's left is, what the hell are you going to do at third base in the meantime? And that's really kind of what one of the main questions was to Matt Arnold as he spoke with reporters here on Monday shortly after the trade. And, Matt Arnold, he does his GM speak, as he always does. He was asked about, the possibility of outside additions to help fill in at third base. And he said, of course we're always looking, for those possibilities, but, we like the guys that we have, because of course they do. But yeah, it is kind of interesting, even with the GM speak, to hear Arnold say, that they feel good about their infield depth. Because, that's something that I really don't feel that great about. Now, granted, he's the president of baseball operations. Okay, he's smarter than me when it comes to this kind of stuff. But he's talked about how they are open to a whole bunch of different, lineups, whole bunch of different permutations to the infield, how things shake out. That could mean potentially Joey Ortiz moving off of shortstop. I've seen that suggested by some. Move him to third, Jet Williams at short, because we did see Joey Ortiz be successful at third base in 2024 in his first season in Milwaukee. He was successful there defensively. He was successful there offensively. So maybe that could be a possibility. So they're open to different variations of that. Now we are going to see David Hamilton get reps at third base. Jet Williams, who was acquired in the Freddie Peralta trade, Matt Arnold said he is also going to get reps at third base, as well as shortstop, as well as second base, as well as center field. So he's going to be getting reps at a whole bunch of different spots to find his spot on the team. And my takeaway from that is I think this is about clearing a spot for Jet Williams, because initially when the Brewers got him, a lot of us were kind of looking. It's like, okay, where exactly is he going to fit in? Because you got Joey Ortiz at short, and they like him there. And defensively, Ortiz is just straight up better, and defense is very important to the Brewers, especially at shortstop. Second base, Bryce Terang, not taking him out of the lineup. So center field, really kind of seemed like the best fit for him. But even there, you got Blake Perkins, you got Garrett Mitchell coming back, and they're expecting and they're hoping Garrett Mitchell to be out there, because when he's healthy, I mean, he's got as much talent or more talent than anyone out there on the field. So they want to give him that kind of an opportunity. So, and third base wasn't really thought of, because third base is like, well, that's Caleb Durban's spot. He clearly proved himself, and he came in, or he was going to be coming in this year as the locked-in third baseman for this team. And so now that is all completely changed. Third base is wide open. And we could end up going, at least for a little while here, with a combination, kind of like we saw in the beginning of last year, where it was Oliver Dunn and Vinny Capra at third base. That's what the Brewers went with on opening day. That's partially maybe why the Brewers got absolutely smacked around by the Yankees during that first series. But they didn't really have a set answer at that spot, because Caleb Durban wasn't ready yet at third base, needed to get some more defensive work in Nashville, then gets called up and takes over the job and finishes third in Rookie of the Year. So, it's interesting there to see Matt Arnold say, they are open to all sorts of different kinds of infield looks, and that they feel good about their infield depth. I certainly don't feel as good. He also mentioned the Comp B pick that the Brewers traded in this deal. Giving that up, I love the draft. Matt Arnold loves the draft. But he also mentioned that they have another pick right next to that. So their second round pick is at 66 overall, and their competitive balance B pick was at 67 overall. So they would have had two picks back to back in this draft, and they traded one of them instead. So they still feel fine about that. Me personally, I'd rather have the draft pick, get another young player into this organization. But also this group, this farm system is also loaded with guys. So finding playing time for some of those draft picks, is certainly perhaps starting to get tougher and tougher. Okay, maybe I guess they're okay having one fewer draft pick. But interesting part of the comments there from Matt Arnold. But yeah, he is open to other additions if any of those flesh out, but you didn't really get the sense that he was saying, like, yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. But then again, Matt Arnold's not going to say that. Okay? He's going to be careful. He's going to have the GM speak. He's not going to say, yes, we are looking for now an outside addition 3 days before pitchers and catchers report. He's not going to say that. It's like, oh, yeah, we're open to it. We like what we got, but, we're open to it. He's not going to give up leverage. He's not going to do that. But still, and that is an area that is going to be of concern, because I'm looking at this infield depth chart here for the Brewers, and it is staggeringly thin in terms of options here, especially on the 40-man. You look at shortstop. You got Joey Ortiz that's over there. Bryce Terang can play there. Jet Williams can play there. David Hamilton, that's a utility guy. Third base, what do you really have as options there? Let's say, for example, Joey Ortiz sticks at short, okay? Let's just go with what we've had. Terang at second, Joey Ortiz at short. All right, who do you have to play third? Right now, you've got David Hamilton. You have Jet Williams that they're going to give reps to. And after that, on the 40-man roster, you have nobody. That's it. Those are the two guys on the 40-man. You can look to Tyler Black. Some may have suggested him. Tyler Black is not going to be playing third base for this team. He is just simply not good enough defensively to play there. The Brewers have no plans of him actually going there. Then you're going down to Eddie's Leonard, a minor league free agent signing. You got him, Brock Wilken, a non-roster invitee to camp, and if you want to include Cooper Pratt in that group, you can. I'm not sure if the Brewers want to move Cooper Pratt to third just yet. I think they'd rather see Wilkin there. But that's it. David Hamilton, Jet Williams, Eddie Leonard, and Brock Wilkin are your third baseman in big league camp in spring training. Brock Wilkin has not played a lick of AAA ball just yet. Eddie Leonard has exhausted all of his minor league options, and he has 0 days of MLB service time. So you don't got much there. And Hamilton, Williams is probably the most exciting option, obviously being a top 100 prospect. But he also only got like 5 weeks of AAA time at the end of last season. So he's kind of green there as well. We'll see if he's able to take to the position enough defensively. But you're really asking a lot here potentially out of David Hamilton and Jet Williams to be the guys here. Sal Frelick, Matt Arnold was asked about Sal Frelick. Is that a possibility at third base? And he didn't shut down the idea, of experimenting with Sal Frelick back over there at third. I'm not sold that they would ever actually do it and put him over there regularly, but still, it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of proven production at that position at third base. And a lot of this, Matt Arnold seemed to be talking about, with the infield depth that they have, how they're very excited about the guys that they have coming up long term on the left side of the infield. So it's Brock Wilkin, it's Andrew Fisher, their first round pick from last year, it's Cooper Pratt, Jet Williams, Jesus Made, Luis Pena. It's those guys that they feel really excited about. So this trade, as much as anything, almost feels like they are clearing room for those guys to come up and make an impact. But I'm not convinced any of them are going to be ready, especially at the beginning part of the season. Brock Wilkin, I could see later in the year. Cooper Pratt, later in the year. Williams could potentially be ready early on in the season, but Made is probably not ready until next year. Pena probably not until next year. Andrew Fisher probably not until next year. So it almost feels like a year early on clearing those guys out. Which, maybe it's just, simply selling high on Caleb Durban. And just feeling like, hey, he's not going to be able to repeat this. If we try and trade him next offseason, we're not going to be able to get as much back. We have an opportunity to get these two studs in the starting rotation. These two really good pitching prospects that we like. We have a chance to get them in the rotation right now. Let's do it. And we'll figure it out at third base from here. Perhaps that's simply the reasoning and the logic behind it. Because as much as you have exciting infield depth for the future, in terms of what you're going to have for at least the beginning part for the first half of 2026, it leaves you in a very vulnerable type position, I feel like. Jet Williams is probably the best internal bet to take over at third base for right now. And I'd rather see Hamilton in more of a utility type role. But that's where things seem to be looking on the infield depth. And then meanwhile, to wrap up here, the rotation depth certainly is the envy of Major League Baseball with what they have. The Brewers have 13 pitchers on their 40-man roster that are starting pitcher caliber type guys. Just running down the list of names here, it is incredible. So the Brewers have Brandon Woodruff, Jacob Mizorowski, Quinn Priester, Chad Patrick, Brandon Sproat, Logan Henderson, Robert Gasser, Aaron Ashby, D.L. Hall, Kyle Harrison, Shane Drowan, Coleman Crowe, and Carlos Rodriguez. 13 pitchers. You got 5 lefties in there now, which is great. But you got 13 guys that you could legitimately plug into this rotation. And I don't know how it's all going to fit. I don't know how it's all going to work out. A couple of those guys are going to be pitching out of the bullpen. A couple of those guys are going to end up making the rotation. A bunch of those guys are going to end up starting the year in AAA Nashville. Nashville's going to have one hell of a rotation. I'll tell you that much right now. They're going to have one hell of a group as the Brewers kind of figure this out and see which, the cream rises to the top. See who becomes the best of this group. I think Harrison's got a really good chance to earn a rotation spot. I think Brandon Sproat has a good chance to earn a rotation spot. I think Chad Patrick, given what he's done, I think he should get a rotation spot. But we'll see how it shakes out in spring training. But it is a great group that should be able to withstand injuries. Hopefully, knock on wood. You don't want to guarantee it. You can never have enough pitching depth. But the Brewers, they've got quite a bit of it. And it is the envy of Major League Baseball. The pitching staff that they have put together, they should be good on starters, and we won't have to rely on Elvin Rodriguez to help get us through some of these games in the early part of the season. That much I know. That much the Brewers should be good on, because they saw enough of Elvin Rodriguez last year to know it's like we have got to be better in starting pitching depth, because that was abysmal. So thankfully that should be avoided again, but it is a very deep group, and one that if they wanted to add to their infield mix with, say, an Isaac Paredes. I know I said Isaac in the last one. I've been informed it's Isaac Paredes. Apologies to him and his family. But if they wanted to, say, make a trade for that, and the Astros want some young, controllable starting pitching, the Brewers have some to trade away if they would like to. So that's just a possibility. Matt Arnold didn't necessarily say that's what's going to end up happening, but that's something that I think we're going to have to talk about until the Astros make that move, because they want to make that move, and I think the Brewers really do need some additional help here in the infield. Matt Arnold feels good about his depth. What about you? Do you feel good about the Brewers' infield depth right now? Let me know down in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, get notified every single time a new episode drops. Follow me on Twitter at dgasper24. Had a bunch of reaction on there today. And we'll continue to talk about this and break this down as spring training is getting underway this week. So again, be sure to subscribe, get notified, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Brewers Daily.